Well, yeah, from Fort Hood, I mean. If they're going to move some troops, then Colonel Dexter is part of the group who says who's going. He's the chief of staff, right? The adjutant general reports to him, gives him the list of who he thinks should go. Colonel Dexter signs the orders. Your daddy's a big shot wheeler-dealer. I don't need to tell you that. Private Hollister put down the notebook. Then he walked to the pool table and picked up a stick, examining it as if it were an item of some interest to him. If they send me to Vietnam, my mom's going to go nuts. They wouldn't send you, I insisted. They couldn't send him. His brother had already died there. It wouldn't be fair to send Private Hollister, too. Private Hollister looked up at me. They will if they want to. But I don't want them to. That made Private Hollister laugh. I figured you'd think this was the opportunity of a lifetime for me. An all-expenses-paid trip to Vietnam. Maybe round trip, maybe not. Go live the life of a real soldier. I looked down at my feet. I guess. Well, do me a favor, okay? Let me know if you hear anything. Your dad might say something to you since he knows we work together. Well, that wouldn't be Army protocol. The colonel doesn't tell me anything about work. Nothing like that, anyway. Private Hollister lined up a shot on the pool table. Maybe you could ask him then. Ask him what he knows. I looked at the clock. It was almost 1. I needed to be at the Lorenzo's house in 15 minutes to babysit Cindy while Miss Lorenzo went to the commissary. I have to go now, I said. I have a babysitting job this afternoon. Think about it, Jamie. If it's going to happen, I need to know. I got to be prepared, in my mind. As I walked out the doors, the sudden crack of the ball scattering across the pool table made me flinch. I remembered something that Sergeant Byrd had told me, that he dreamed about Vietnam almost every night, and some nights he woke up to find himself crouched in the dark between the bunks in his barracks, his whole body alert, listening. Listening for what? I'd asked him. That sound before the sound, he told me. The sound that comes right before the sound of everything getting blown to smithereens. I did not want Private Hollister to go to Vietnam. I didn't want anyone else I knew going to Vietnam. But Private Hollister was the one I might be able to help. In my hand, I held one very important card. I made a fist. I got ready to knock. Chapter 11. When I got to Cindy, she wanted to put on a ballet show for me, and I said sure. But I barely paid attention. I was so busy thinking about what I would say to the colonel. Somehow I had to convince him to keep Private Hollister at Fort Hood. But how do you ask the most full-out Army man in the Army for a favor like that? My biggest obstacle was plain and simple Army protocol, which of course the colonel was a stickler for. You did things a certain way, played by the Army rules at all times, followed the chain of command. If the rumors were true, some bigwig over in Vietnam had decided he needed more radio operators, and some other bigwig, probably at the Pentagon, looked through his files and came up with the great idea of sending a few from 1st Signal Troop Fort Hood. The paperwork would be drawn up by a clerk, copied in triplicate, rubber stamped and sent over to Fort Hood, and up the chain until it reached the colonel, who would sign it, unless there was an excellent reason not to. He does not mess with protocol, period. You aren't watching me. Cindy stood in front of me, hands planted on her hips. You're looking at me, but you're not watching. I know because that's what my dad does too. I was watching, really, I lied. You looked really good. I like how you twirl around. Cindy nodded, like she agreed that she was quite a fine twirler. My mom says if I keep practicing, I can get real ballerina shoes with hard toes. And maybe I can take lessons over at Miss Maria's dance studio in Killen. You want to show me some more? Cindy sat down next to me on the couch. No, I'm tired now, and I'm very sad. Why are you sad? Because my mom told me that Mark won't be home for Christmas. He'll still be fighting in the war. Yeah, TJ won't be home for Christmas either, I said, realizing it for the first time. What would it be like to go downstairs Christmas morning by myself to see if Santa Claus, a.k.a. the Colonel, had come? What would it be like without TJ behind me, excited as a little kid, even when all Santa had left him the last few years were clothes and new sports equipment? Do you think Santa Claus goes to Vietnam? Cindy asked. I nodded. Sure, he goes everywhere. When we lived in Germany, he came to Germany. He'll go to Vietnam too. Cindy sat up. I was born in Germany. I was born in West Berlin, West Germany, in a United States Army hospital. I was born in Berlin, Germany, but I'm still an American, so don't tell me I'm not. She elbowed me in the ribs to emphasize her point. I was born in Heidelberg, I told her, moving over a few feet so she couldn't get me again. But I'm an American too. All Army kids born in Germany are. A boy at school called me a Nazi. He said I was like Hitler. Cindy chewed on a cuticle, her eyes darting around the room. I told him he was crazy. I said, you're so crazy it makes me hate you. Yeah, that's what happened to me, I said. Kids calling me a Nazi. They think it's funny. Cindy and I looked at each other. Now we had two things in common. Brothers in Vietnam and being called Nazis by jerks. It was quite a list. We're Americans, you and me, Cindy said, and clapped her right hand over her heart. We're not stupid Nazis. Not us, I agreed. We sat there quietly for a minute with a friendly feeling around us. I started wondering how complicated Cindy's thoughts got about things. She knew Mark was fighting in Vietnam, but did she know what war looked like? Was she scared he wouldn't come home, or that he'd come home missing an arm or a leg? Why, I suddenly wondered, was TJ sending me pictures of soldiers missing arms and legs? Why was TJ sending me pictures? Why was he trying to scare me, or was he just trying to tell me that war wasn't anything like the way we had dreamed it, playing it with our little green army men under the trees? I looked down at my hands and suddenly I got it. Of course, that's what TJ was trying to tell me. He was smart enough to know I wouldn't believe it if all he sent me were words. He had to show me with pictures. Cindy jumped up. I have a present for you. Stay right here. I imagined Cindy traipsing back into the room with some papier-mâché glob she'd made at the art camp her mother had taken her to the week before. But when she returned, she was carrying Brutus. You can take 'em, Cindy said, because I was thinking about it, and I remembered that I have something else from you to keep. I have all the moon pictures you gave me. I don't need so many things from you. Only one or two at a time. Things of mine? Yes. And then I pretend we're sisters who share things. I took this opportunity to study my toes and feel guilty for all the times I could have been nicer to Cindy. I felt like I should do something right then, like give Cindy a little hug or tell her I thought of us as sisters too. But I didn't have it in me, which I understood then and still understand to this day to be a sorry thing. And then Cindy smiled at me. Do you know I used to be a princess? You're not a princess anymore? She shook her head. No, I've decided I'd rather be president of the United States. You can do more things when you're president. Did you know I can be president even though I was born in Germany? It's a law that says it. Nobody can tell me I can't. They'd be stupid to try, I agreed. She sat down and leaned towards me so that her face was close to mine. She looked left, then right, and then whispered, I'm going to be president so I can make them send Mark home. My mom keeps crying. She says she's going to kill herself if he dies in that war. She said that to you? Cindy put her fingers to her lips. Shh. No, she said it to Daddy when they thought I was asleep, only I was spying. She didn't even say it. She screamed it. I was very frightened. But if I was president, I wouldn't be frightened because I could bring Mark home. And TJ too, if you want me to. Sure, I said. That would be good. But the funny thing was, it almost made me feel sad to say it, because I knew that if I wanted TJ to come home, then I had lost my good feelings about the war forever. I had lost the excitement that used to get me so wound up I could hardly calm back down again for hours. I lost the Green Army men under the shady trees, and the thrill I felt when I imagined being an ambulance driver in a combat zone. I lost hoo-ah and combat ready, sir. And when you got right down to it, if I lost all those things, I had practically lost my own self, which is a sad and depressing thought to have. And I would have kept having it, except Cindy handed me Brutus, the first real present TJ had ever given me. Making me learn my way around the darkroom had been the second. So maybe I wasn't so lost after all. Chapter 12. When TJ had come home for a few days after basic training, he'd looked like a completely different person. He looked like a soldier. I was almost scared to talk to him because I could tell he was a changed person, and I knew that whatever he had gone through in basic training had made him stronger and harder, more ready for war. It made me feel like a little kid just to stand beside him. I figured that's what I was compared to him, a kid, and I figured that when he got back from Vietnam, it would be like there were 20 years between us instead of just 5. And we might not have anything to say. We'd be so different from each other. When he got back, he would have been in a real war. Probably the closest TJ and I've ever been was when he was 12 and I was 7. I was old enough and smart enough by then to do stuff with him, and he was still enough of a kid that he could include a 7-year-old in his plans. Those were our best war days, when we kept notebooks of our make-believe battles and ran home from General McCarthy Elementary School, where TJ was in 6th grade and I was in 2nd, so we could set up our Army guys and test out our strategies against the enemy, which was commanded by Bobby Kerner and his little brother Charles. In a way, it's like we had been soldiers together. I wondered if he still remembered how that felt. One thing I knew for sure when I saw him after basic training was that he'd forget the old days soon enough if he hadn't already. He was headed for a real combat zone. I've been assigned to the 51st Medical Company based in Fubai, he reported at the dinner table. We ship out next Tuesday. My mother paled. That soon? From what they're telling us, they need all the help they can get over there, as fast as they can get it. Then TJ leaned back in his chair and looked at the colonel. Sir, he said, I need you to do something for me. All this time the colonel had been listening, but not saying anything. Now he folded his arms across his chest and said, What do you need me to do, son? I need you to act like you're proud of me. The colonel looked like TJ had punched him in the gut. It was the most outright look of surprise I'd ever seen on his face. It took him a minute to gather himself enough to say, Of course I'm proud of you, TJ. You just think I made a mistake. We're past all that, son, the colonel said, looking surer of himself now. I'm with you 100%. I'm just trying to get used to the idea of you being a soldier.